breaking points. Normative chronology and conflict chronology. That is the breaking points. So then social reaction, he says, you see norms. Norms for what? There are many people escape. You don't talk about their norms, their violations. Then starts conflict, theories, social reaction theory. It's a very good theory, particularly the reformative aspect also that we have. I tell you one example. Our former chief minister wanted to reform, commercial sex workers living in Mumbai. One special train was arranged so that he was there in Mumbai, brought around 800 people, all there in Mumbai, staying there for years together. And when they reached there, they were kept in the protective house. We call it a vigilance court, protective house. Most of them were taken all the way, cheating them. When they were all children, they become adolescents, adults. They came to the great hope they are going to see their parents. When they went there, they were not accepted. I know 2 more girls, they should get married. We have already finished everything as we did. Lot of rituals. Please go back. About 800, not even 50 stayed back in Chennai. They were all forced to go back. This is the social reaction. What is the society reacts? So the criminologists see that from the crime from their perspective. That we react, we don't react towards corruption. That way, but at the time of election also, who has committed less corruption will be given preference than the person who has committed more corruption. This is how we vote, that is there is no other alternative for us also. Social reaction. But from the delinquent perspective, it's very important. This is one of the labeling. Suppose a boy in a village is taken, a report given by the police is taken. The social stigma started, the labeling process starts. The labeling process started, I think one vessel was taken from one place. My neighbor was working in the Tamil Nadu housing board. He highly corrupt fellow, he is a agent to the minister. He was telling, catch him, beat him, take him. So that he was taken, and the people around told him, this fellow has committed theft. So that the process of labeling started. So that informally he is labeled as a delinquent. He is go to the police station. There also police station says, yes, this group we are down. He is taken to the juvenile justice board. Court also declares, yes, you are delinquent. Informally he was delinquent. Yeah. And again, when he goes back, he goes to the correctional institution, comes back, we were discussing about aftercare. There is no acceptance on the part of the society. He thinks, I want to be a reformed person, but the society did not accept me. I want to be a non-delinquent. So I want to change myself. Why should I be delinquent? Because anything comes on the street, if police comes immediately and takes me back. So that a strong labeling that has made him a change within the individual, a personality changing things. I want to be a non-delinquent, but the society does not permit me delinquent, so that I go back. This is how the recidivist the outcome. a number of preventive measures are there. I hope we will explain to you. My time is over. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, I think it's afternoon now. I want to give some presentation. As just now we heard Professor Thiagarajan talking about, and we began with what is delinquency. When we say delinquency, many of you have answered that particular word's answer, that it is some deviant behavior, isn't it? Some type of behavior which is not up to the norms of the society. So when we say this, I mean this become a very typical traditional line, norms, the behavior which is not as per the norms of the society. When we say this, it varies from time to time and period to period and society to society. Like for example, at one point of time, by the children, the very simple behavior when elderly people enters into their room or they come nearby to those people, they used to wish, they used to stand up if they were sitting, isn't it? But do you not, having a feeling, or all of us have not noticed that this particular thing is not existing anymore in the society? What I'm trying to tell you that all of you, as I came to know, are from the criminology field, either teaching or researching upon either in the law or social sciences. So these are the typical traditional bookish things, that deviancy, definition, juvenile delinquency. But when we think about its practicality, first of all, it existed from all times, time immemorial, till date. And if we go through certain data, certain statistics, all of you must have gone through. Nowadays it is so much easily available, all sorts of reports, whether of our country's National Crime Report Bureau, or of other police bodies, or it can be international scenario, their statistics, their country's increase in crime. So you can find out there is always a gradual increase. There is in fact, in our country is simple, which can be the tip of the iceberg. I may say, because not all the cases are reported. National Crime Report Bureau, which is taken to be one of the most authentic report, which of course is not reporting all the offences or all the crimes or all the delinquencies committed by the children or by the elderly people. It still show that it has become the 3 times within a period of 10 years. All right. So what I was trying to question from all of you, that the behaviors which we used to, there is a difference between me and you also. Maybe I'm 10 years older to some of you, or 20 years older. If my mother even today, she comes in front of me, I will definitely get her. Whatever she will say, even if I agree or I do not agree, I'll say like that. Instead of that, today's children, even if they are 10-year-old or 15-year-old, they always have a feeling of arguing with you. They have their own viewpoint. Sometimes, of course, it's good also, but they always have their own tendency. They are working with the computer. When you enter into the room, they don't get up, even they may be sitting cross-legged, but that is not taken to be any delinquent or wrong behavior in today's scenario. So somehow, gradually, we have also started accepting certain behaviors which are not very much delinquent in nature, and once upon a time, they could have been taking ये गलत बात है, ये ठीक नहीं है, ये wrong है, ऐसे थोड़ी ना behave करा जाता है. Number 1. Number 2, as Thiagarajan very beginning said, that all of us must be some type of delinquent features into us, otherwise we are not normal. That's true. Actually, in our childhood, we all remember, अब गुल्लक के पैसे चुरा लेते थे, दूसरे भाई बहन के अपना ले लिया, किसी को मार दिया, किसी के साथ prank करा. So some type of behaviors which were taken to be normal, but if they perpetually and gradually continue, may take the shape of some type of delinquency. So delinquency is in some other form exists in every human being, but it depends upon how it is taken up in future, how it is taken up, how it grows into a person. Now, another important question which comes up when we talk of delinquency, so all of us understand it is some behavior which is not up to the norms of the society, which is somehow in conflict with law. Nowadays, the word is conflict of law, because delinquency is taken to be a little more stigmatized word, so we use the word conflict of law. So behaviors which are in conflict of laws and which are liable to be to the punishment are the deviant behavior, and that exists in every society. With the passage of time, we always talk of dealing with that delinquency and to differentiate that delinquent behavior with that of the typical crime. So from now onward, I want to show you some sides which are very general in nature. I will be explaining each one of them. In our country, children constitute quite a number of population. What is the population of the children in our country? Approximately, as per the census also, they constitute actually almost half of the population. Children up to the age of 18 years, they constitute almost 42 to 44% of population, which means they are quite large in number, and their behavior, their tendencies, their culture, their upbringing matters a lot. Now I want to tell you some. When we say delinquency, first of all we should understand what is the difference between crime and delinquency. So delinquency is an act or behavior which is not normal. Abnormality can be either superior or inferior. When we say this word, behavior which is not normal, which is not up to the norms of the society. So norms of the society is one thing. When we say abnormal, abnormality can be either superior or inferior. So superior people are genius and they can be beneficial to the society. However, inferiors, due to some of their reasons, they can become harmful to the society. When the behavioral pattern is harmful, it may be called or it may become sometimes harmful to the society. Now, juvenile delinquency, it can be characterized by antisocial behavior that is beyond parental control and therefore subject to legal action. It is a violation of the law committed by the juvenile and not punishable by death or life imprisonment. Then, this I was talking about child population, and accordingly, now not the whole population is involved in delinquency, but according to data and statistics which you can find out, it is a large number of children who have been found to be indulged in delinquency. Now another question which is always raised, that most of the time delinquency can be due to the reason of, what do you think, what can be the reason for children delinquency? What can, सबसे पहला, this is what I want to listen. The first and foremost reason which comes for is poverty. Yes, it may be, but do you think it is always the poor children who will indulge into delinquency? Especially looking into nowadays news, nowadays reports, and nowadays TV and other shows. In fact, it is children who are from very good and affluent families. अभी recently था, 2 बच्चों ने मिलकर अपनी grandmother को मार डाला. Sometimes you find out that they kill their own parent, or they do something wrong in the school, they do something wrong by lifting the cars, though they are having their own cars. The children who are belonging to the family having 2-3 cars or other automobile vehicles, but despite that they are indulging into that type of act. What is the reason now?
Broken home. Rich lifestyle.
Rich lifestyle, to be indulged in more luxurious life, to be at par, to be peer pressure कि हमारे पास और ज़्यादा चीज़ें हों, it is a show of worth. So not always the poverty, which was otherwise was cited as one of the most important factor. Even if we talk of factors such as biological factors or physical factors or mental factors, I'm coming on to the slide. Whatever I'm giving you in the slide, that is a typical information provided in all sort of books and on the internet. So these are the reasons, but I want to discuss it beyond to it. First talking about those things and then discussing it beyond to it. Like for example, the factors of juvenile delinquency which have been generally cited and which has been found out through various case studies, and these are physical factors, mental factors, home conditions, school conditions, labor conditions, occupation conditions. Previously also it has been referred, and this is very true also, that physical factors may be responsible for a child being delinquent. Mental factors are of course there, home conditions are necessarily one of it, and very majorly of it. In fact, all these conditions all have their connection within it also. It may be a physical factor, for example. If the children who are victims or who are subjected to malnutrition, so they always have a wish to eat better and better and to satisfy their this hunger or to satisfy their nutritional needs, because of which they can commit as small as delinquency to go to some wedding or to go to some party and eat up afterwards. So what type of delinquency will it constitute? Will it be subject to or liable to punishment, or some type of criminal system punishes for that or not? Then sometimes because of lack of sleep. Now when we say lack of sleep, it can be due to some physical condition of illness, or it can be due to some physical comfort. It's comfort also, and comfort again is directly related to the poverty or the economic conditions of the family. So these are also automatically, and now when they say a person who is not slept properly or who had not had his leisure or rest properly may be deviated, because we also sometimes don't we feel we are irritated, and that time we may cite the reason that I didn't have a proper sleep, or I have so many other things on my mind, or I have so much of other irritation due to certain other reasons. So we always cite those type of reasons. That means if we are at a comfort level, our behavior is very normal, our behavior is very much within the pattern. Otherwise it goes beyond to it whenever something is against our conditions. So these are the typical factors. Physical factors where you can take malnutrition, lack of, there can be many more. I am not saying the list is exhausted. In this also there can be many more factors. You can see some of them. Then it can be mental factors. Again, mental defects, some type of psychoneurosis, repression and substitution, inferiority complex of a child. Then adolescent emotional inability, we'll talk about these points further. Then sex habits and experience, mental conflicts, etc. These are the situations, or these are the reasons or factors which may lead a child to indulge into delinquency. Then home conditions, you can see these ones are also connected to the first and second one. Material deficiencies in the family, material excess, broken homes and unhappy relationships, previously discussed. Yes, broken homes and unhappy relations. When I am referring to broken homes, you can understand that means either mother or father living separately, or unhappy relations, you can understand that always fights are going on in the family, always some type of conflict in the family, either within the parent or with the siblings, or one of the sibling and the parents. So some type of conflictive situation can lead another child into the delinquency, and this is very common thing which most of the time occurs in most of the families. Some children live with it and won't indulge into it, some children take it otherwise and may indulge into some delinquency. Then mental, physical and abnormality of parents and siblings, then stigma of illegitimacy, lack of parent. If you can define all these, that these can be, and this again the list can be much more. Then school conditions also sometimes leads the children to indulge into delinquency. I think most of you can relate to it. Sometimes not getting good grades make a child to lie as small as paper nahi mila hai, isn't it? Yeah, mera A grade aaya, later on in the report card you will find C grade. I mean, these are very petty and small things which all of us can find. But this not necessarily always lead a child to become a thief or rapist or a murderer. Sometimes, I mean, these are the petty things. Later on it goes on, the child gets admission to some good professional course and becomes some of the other professional. But sometimes these are the things may perpetuate in a particular person's life and may lead him to commit some further. And many other things which takes place at a school level. Sometimes nowadays sexual abuse is also becoming very common in that. Because as sir already told you, I have my work much more on the child rights. And in my research I have found out that these are the factors which is becoming much more, that the statistical data with regard to things are not available, but it is becoming much higher, especially the children are going to schools. In fact, they are most of the time out of the house. I'm not from Delhi originally, now I'm living in Delhi for past 25 years, but I remember my childhood in a small town of UP as compared to the children living and studying in Delhi school. They are almost the whole day out, first in the schools for so long, from 6 o'clock to 2:30 or 3:30, then going to the coaching classes. Yeah, ma'am.
What is the percentage, as you research, what is the percentage of the juvenile delinquents you've seen in rural and urban areas?
Of course,
Where you find more?
with regard to school, it is in, of course,
No.
with regard to
Juvenile delinquents you find more in rural?
No,
or in
I'm not
urban?
talking about juvenile delinquency, not my original. So I'm talking about this sexual and physical abuse in school. I'm referring to only one particular aspect, not the whole juvenile delinquency, but I'm referring to the school conditions which lead the child to have a delinquent behavior. That is the sexual abuse of the child in school. Physical abuse, all of us are aware, corporal punishment थोड़ी बहुत मिल जाती थी, but with regard to sexual abuse, which is becoming more and more and not being disclosed to the people, but which results into some type of stigma and that, and leading the children into it. Right? And that is my research as well as one of the research conducted by Ministry of Women and Child Welfare and one NGO Priyas, and they have found out for the first time, not even in the urban schools, even in the rural schools, the sexual abuse in the schools and at the study places is much on. In fact, this particular study also find out one factor which was not at all prevalent, that is emotional and psychological abuse, which is not very easy, or I mean to define also. What will you call it? Psychological or emotional abuse. One child is compared to another child by the parent or by the school teacher. तुम ठीक हो, तुम अच्छा नहीं करते हो. So the indicators are very tough within our community. And that is happening, and that research is coming up. In fact, in the next research is going on to come much more the data as of the previous. Then you can say the neighboring conditions are also responsible with regard to the juvenile delinquency. This can be proximity to luxury and wealth if the children don't have, congested neighborhood and slums, their loneliness, lack of social outlets, overstimulating movies and shows. With regard to the factors which are responsible for delinquency, adolescent instability is one thing which is common, that when the children enter into the age which is after 12 years, 13 years, adolescent age, that time all of us in fact must have experienced, we believe me, mine, my style. We don't want any interference by the elder. That is the stage which comes into life. That instability you can say, or you can say biological development also takes place into the body. So that instability is there in the bodies, which sometimes, not to all the children, but to some children, enters into juvenile delinquency. That means when they are at that stage, they have some peer pressures also. Because of that, they start stealing money from the parents first. They start going out and not telling the parents where they are going. They want that they should go to movie shows which are adult in nature. They want certain things which they don't want to, and above all, they don't want to disclose that to their parents. They indulge into those behaviors. So that is adolescent instability, which is not something abnormal, which is very normal. But that normal thing sometimes can become abnormal in certain cases. Then uncongenial roles, which earlier also I talked, that if the atmosphere in the family, if the circumstances and conditions in the family are such, which leads a child to go into, some of the child are able to tolerate the fights, the discussions, the poverty, the other type of factors, but some of the child, because of that, may run away from the house, may take some other type of steps, and may enter into delinquency. Then sex indulgence. I'm sorry, associational impact. Associational impact, the friends, their associates, they put a lot of impact in a person's life. We always understand if a child have good friends, then he always is going on to be a good person, good grader, good schooling, and then further leading to good college life and good everything. But if a child falls into the company or the friends group is not of good people who are not good in studies or who are wandering or who are the people who are into bad things, then obviously this association is going on to have a greater impact and can lead a child into juvenile. Then sex indulgence, especially this is true from time immemorial also, but it is more true nowadays because nowadays children want to experience sex at a very early age. When they indulge into this, maybe initially they are in love with somebody or they have good feelings, but later on this can result into a bad habit or into the habit of being consistently into teenage sex, and that can lead them into, because each thing is linked to another thing. For that they may require not getting the permission from the parent, going outside, being with their friend, staying with their friend's house, so that can lead them into delinquency. Then movies. How do you feel movies are responsible to put the children into delinquency? Are the movies responsible?
Movies basically show you how a
Hero eliminates the thing. So sometimes it is hero, even if that is violence, that is fight very heroic act.
And then they think that yes, violence is the way to get justice, and that is how we eliminate things in
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Largely, movies are showing what is happening in the society.
Exactly. Now it does the same sentence. I was what is, are the movies reflection of the society or the society reflects the movie? The sentence can be both ways around. Because most of the time, in fact, when we go to the movies, even we watch serials. You remember the title of the serial, कहानी घर घर की. What does it convey? कि वो जो सीरियल में दिखाते, पहले ज़माने में हमारे पास कुछ अपना काम करा और पड़ोस के जाके बैठ गए या पड़ोस के आके बैठ गए, वो अपने घर का किस्सा सुना रहे हैं, चाहे वो परेशानी का, चाहे वो खुशी का, और आप अपना किस्सा सुना. Today we don't have that type of time or that type of habit. Today the same thing we watch on the TV.
I remember Rashtu in Anadi.
Yeah.
So he confronted some person who was in the party, and he got in that party wallet.
Right.
So he would walks with that wallet to searching whose wallet it is. So the gentleman is standing over there. कहता है कि देखो कि तुम अनाड़ी देखो जो पार्टी में है, इनको भी कभी वॉलेट से मिले थे, इन्होंने कभी लौटाए नहीं, तुम लौटा रहे हो। ये है
बिल्कुल ठीक बात.
जो लौटा रहे हैं वो अनाड़ी।
So with regard to movies, we cannot definitely say it is watching the movies makes a person delinquent. In fact, people, the
बहुत सारे लोगों ने पर्स नहीं लौटाया होंगे।
हाँ, exactly.
बहुत सारे लोगों ने नहीं लौटाया होंगे. That is what he said.
Those who return, those who did not.
But movies have a wide audience. So this is
Wide audience and the way they show it, and large number of
spreads
people.
the wrong message. Why you're right that all these things exist in the society. But previously, less people knew it and less people did.
And those who were indulged into it were
Now
knowing it.
everybody has an access to all these things. So now people are watching these things and learning from it. Like
I agree
CID
with you.
or in these kind of ones where the crime patrol is there.
Yes.
To give ideas to the ones who could be, they have that element and this stimuli works with them.
True.
And where one is aware.
True.
So
And
it works both.
yeah, you are right. And then with regard to many situations, for example, even with regard to family things, certain things we feel we may say to the person, we may not. But if watching in a serial or in a movie, we can say definitely see she also did the same thing.
Creates a
So-
negative impact basically on how things. It might not happen in someone's house, but since she and her mother-in-law sit together and watch that serial, then they also get that hostile environment.
Right. And we start, even sometimes identifying our own people who are around us with regard to some characters, especially ये तो उसकी तरह behave कर रही है, कोमोलिका की तरह कर रही है, उसकी तरह कर रही है.
That's why in Europe they call it a
Idiot walk. But we are getting more and more used to this idiot walk now in each room.
Why? Because lot of people are, the work pressure is so high that they don't have time to indulge with the real people. So what they have started making friend of the virtuality in their life. So they want to be more virtual,
Right.
have an imaginary friend. If I will be staying alone in the house, the minute first thing will be done, I will go and open up.
What's your name?
Airbnb, Anuja Kapoor.
Anuja, when I said this कहानी घर में, you know, I want to say the same thing. I said हम वही कहानी घर में बैठ के देखते हैं दूसरों की घर की and उससे satisfy होते हैं कि ऐसे ऐसे होता. Otherwise we use.
होगी, some groups are less expressive, some groups are more expressive, उनका peer group influence नहीं होगा, उसके साथ ये लोग कहते होंगे धीरे चलाओ. अब भी made it a point कि 3-4 बच्चे किसी गाड़ी में साथ नहीं बैठे. We used to travel from Nainital to Lucknow, so 2 cars used to go. बच्चे अलग अलग करो, अलग गाड़ियों में करो, उनकी माताओं के साथ बैठाओ, because children will कहाँ औरतें चलाओ और because all children
This is one of the
are
treatment
given
which
to
you are telling
exercise.
actually. Group formation. Who are this to take
Yeah,
up?
rest we will discuss. This is the time to rent the guest house. Thank you for excellent talk and resume next session after the lunch. Let's see what is there in the schedule. Is devoted to look at the social work approach to technology. This we could not discuss because Vijay had some commitments. He was going to come in the initial days and he has made it to today. But some of you might be aware that technology owes a lot to social work traditions. In fact, Indian technology in a big way started from data social sciences, right from the days of Professor Panankar and Professor Gore. This has a rich history and legacy of technology. And they had initially a focus on correctional work because the department which now Vijay belongs to initially was Department of Technology and Correctional Administration. And the department has been very actively locating the social work intervention in the arena of correctional administration and the denial issues, women gender issues, because this has a mandate to marginalize the So they had a rich tradition of technology. And this particular session, we wanted to, understand what is the social work peculiarities which are quite useful and they are very well recognized in criminology and how it's a method basically. I always say social work is a rich methodology which brings a lot of useful insights in criminology sectors. So to address this session, we have 2 panelists from this Center for Criminology and Justice. Now this is known as Center for Criminology and Justice. And we have Professor Vijay Raghavan. Some of you may be knowing him. He's a very outstanding scholar in the field of criminology. And I have the pleasure of knowing him since last many years. And I have seen him growing and these days he is very actively engaged and a very specialist person. And I always admire his approach to the issues and he had got occasion to discuss all these things. So I am quite sure this session is going to be very important. And he has first-hand experience of intervening the situation on the ground. But that is the peculiarity of social work approach. They are more field-based only. In this session, however, he would initially propound the conceptual paradigms in social work useful in criminology, and in the next session he would especially discuss the field action projects, which is again a very different type of feature in criminology which other departments may not be having because of the training in social work methodology. They have that kind of specialization. So I am very happy, and I, on behalf of the National Law University Delhi, I extend a warm welcome to Professor Vijay
Vijayaraghavan. And then we also have Dr. Ruchi Sinha, again a colleague of Professor Vijayaraghavan in the same center. She has been very actively associated with all these issues related to social work and criminology. So both the panelists will address this issue. Today you have two sessions in the morning. So without break you can go, just announce that now we are switching to the second session so that we know that now you have finished it. You decide how you would like to divide your inputs. And this group, to tell you very briefly, this group comprises three features, three types of person. One who are from criminology departments of Delhi and Chennai and Harvard. And also we have other group who is from law background, interested in criminology in some way. And third is of course colleagues from social work. There. So looking at the type of group, you can decide how you like. Moreover, we are going in a very interactive way in all these ways. So you can raise issues and engage in it. I leave it to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vajpayee, for those really kind words. But the fact of the matter is that it's a real pleasure to be here because we are with colleagues. We are not with some seminar where there are police officers and prison officers and you have to constantly defend yourself. This is an academic place where it's a free flow exchange of ideas. I also would really like to congratulate National Law University and in particular Professor Vajpayee and Professor Rao for having conceived this idea along with people like Professor Pandey of the Indian Society of Criminology. I think this was really required and I feel that this could become some kind of a regular feature. It need not be the only time it's being done. At least once in 2 years, if we have something like this, it could go around in rotation. Other universities could offer to host something like this. Because we really miss this part of interacting with colleagues. I would just share with you how we plan to take this session. Ruchi and I would first give you a brief introduction of where we are located in the School of Social Work and how there have been some shifts and changes, even including the nomenclature from the Department of Criminology and Correctional Administration to the Center for Criminology and Justice. What are the reasons behind that? And then we would go into the substance of the presentation that we've been asked to do. I also thank you for giving us this topic because it made us think, what is this? We've been doing this, but what is the social work approach to criminology? We always felt we are from the Center for Criminology and Justice in Social Work Department. So that has helped us to conceptualize a bit, which we will present to you. So I'll just start a bit and then I'll also ask Ruchi to share her thoughts. Like everyone here knows, and what Professor Vajpayee also said, that so criminology department was the first department in the country at TIS, located within social work, and Professor Panakkal played a sterling role in contributing to the growth and development of criminology. But it was a criminology which was more of governmental criminology, where there was, it was a different era, and the idea was to set up criminology as a discipline in close coordination with the government. That was the phase, maybe from the 50s right up to the 80s. Late 70s and early 80s. But somewhere around the 70s, government collaboration with TIS in terms of the deputation of candidates, which was the earlier pattern. Candidates used to be deputed from government departments. They would do their 2-year master's program and then they would go and join the department. So it was like a happy coexistence. The department never had to think about job placements because all of the candidates were already placed. But since the late 70s, the practice of deputing candidates began to be on the wane, and it stopped completely after the early 80s. And By then also you had people like Professor Banakal had retired, and you had a new group of people who were heading the department, and that kind of led to another kind of changes. We also went through a phase where the criminology department did undergo some kind of a downfall, and there was a crisis of sorts in terms of jobs, in terms of students. Number of students were applying for it. We also found that in other social work departments across the country, criminology departments started closing down. And this continued as the only criminology department doing social work, but with a lot of challenges that people had to look at. I think one very important contribution to the, I would say, the resurgence of criminology within social work at TIS has been the contribution of Dr. Sanoga Sahni, who has been a pioneer in terms of working in the field and really being able to bring out a lot of developments. She's the person who started Prayas, which is a field action project of the Center for Criminology and Justice, which works in the criminal justice system. Continues to be very active in the field, but does not interact much in other academic circles. So what began to happen was that from the 80s, she started placing students of social work in the kind of settings that it was never done before. So she started placing students in jails. She started placing students in courts, criminal courts. She started placing students in police stations. This was something that was never thought of, that social work students could be placed in such settings. And that really brought about a radical shift in the way we think in terms of what should be the role of social work in criminology. And the idea of social work in criminal justice, which was a very well established sub-field in the field of social work in criminology in the West, is something that she is the person who really thought of it, conceived of it, and implemented it and put it into action. So from the 1985, mid-80s to the 90s was a phase of consolidation, and there was a lot of developments taking place in the department, and the students were the driving force behind it. Every batch of students were inspired by her and other colleagues to do the kind of work, including, for example, during the Bombay riots, students of the department did fantastic work, and that was recognized by the police commissioner himself. So a lot of this kind of work began to happen, and I think that really contributed to the way we are today. 2006, we restructured from departments into a school of social work. And within the school of social work, we started off with 6 centers. Today we are 9 centers within the school of social work, one of which is Center for Criminology and Justice. The nomenclature itself shows the shift that has taken place from criminology and correction administration to criminology and justice, which means a much wider canvas. So we are now a fairly young department, though I have a lot of grey hair, but most of us are at a phase where we are also developing ourselves, building ourselves up, and we are quite happy to be where we are. So we kind of share the perspective that we have as we go along, but for the time being, I think I'll stop here and I'll request Ruchi.
So basically belonging to an old young department brings about its own challenges, and yet locating the department's work within the larger academia has been a huge intimidating challenge, but I think we met it up, not only because of the rich history that we have, but also because of the scope and the space that this whole intersection between social work and criminology provides us with. So technically, if you see, we belong to the profession of social work, but we belong within the academic space of criminology. And it is a method of practice, like Professor Bajpai said, and hence getting all 3 aspects on board within the center has allowed us to permeate all boundaries. So whether it was working with the government, it was always with a different flavor. It was not only assisting them in their tasks, it was broadening their horizons as well within their own work. So whether it was police, and through field action projects we did that with the police, the prisons, the courts, etc., or whether it was with the community. So working from the institutions to the community is the broad pathway that we've taken, and that has helped us understand that criminology has to be a broadened perspective. It has to have people's perspective. And that is where social work in criminology, which is known as forensic social work in the West, but criminal justice social work here is what we call it. This trajectory of work is what we are going to attempt to present in our presentation today.
So, one more thing I want to add is when we had decided that we will do this back and forth to Dalbandi. So one of the things that strikes me also is that how for a long time we were seen as field workers. They are good in the field. They don't understand theory. They don't understand academics. So, and that has also been one of the tensions within in Tata Institute also, always. Because you had social science research units and you had the social work departments. And this tension used to be there that we are good in the field and they know theory. And so we used to say, you don't know the field. So this thing was going on for a long time until now I think some kind of a balance is being reached where I think there's a recognition that there's a need for both. So we've had a head start in the field because we all worked in the field. In the tradition in which people like Sanogar Phu doesn't. I graduated in '89 and went into Prayas, and then for 15 years I was working in the field. That's true of most of us who belong to this generation of criminology, social work people. But then there was this niggling doubt about whether we are good academicians, And when I joined the institute in 2006, I didn't have a PhD, and the director of the institute, Professor Parshuraman, said that you have to do your PhD. I almost had a disdain for getting into academics, and then of course had to go through the grind and finish it, and So I think now we have reached a point where we are quite comfortable with wherever we are. So, and I think gradually there's been some kind of a recognition also of this kind of work that has happened.
I think there's just one thing that in the center we keep talking about. I think this is one criminology department where women are more than men. So I think that goes a long way to say feminist criminology is probably arriving, and we are definitely working towards it.
What I'll do is we'll kind of take you through we've built some kind of an outline in terms of what we understand by social work approach to criminology. And as we go along, at any given point in time, if you want to stop us, or you want a clarification, or you have a comment to offer, you don't disagree with us, please do not hesitate, because that's what we would prefer it to be. So the first thing that I'd like to put on board is something about social work per se, and how social work is different from pure social sciences. For those of you who may not be familiar with this, that for us the way we understand it is social work goes beyond the analysis of social phenomena into the realm of intervention. So for all of us, whether we are as teachers or as fieldwork supervisors or as students, this is one thing that is emphasized again and again and again right through the academic program, that our job does not stop at understanding phenomena, but to be able to do something about it, and how do you go about it, and that there is a knowledge behind how you go about doing it. There is a methodology to it, like Professor Bajpayee rightly said. But then the real challenge becomes that while a lot of the tradition of social work in India has been working with families and communities in the open setting, the challenges of working in closed settings or in criminal justice settings or in juvenile justice settings has been an approach where there has been more of government intervention. That means social workers have been appointed as part of the system. I'm talking historically, now that is also changing.
and they were the people who went and worked with people in custody and in the correctional field. And therefore, students would be limited to the extent of placements while they were doing field. But once they graduated, I'm especially talking of the generation after the 80s, they would not necessarily go and join those particular kind of settings. So it became some kind of a challenge for us in terms of how do we take this knowledge of criminology which we are developing into the intervention aspect. So this is one thing that I'd like to add. The second thing that I would like to bring to the table here is that the ideological base of social work is based on the fact that we believe in social and individual change. And in that order, the way we understand it, that at the end of the day, social work is about bringing about social change and also individual change. It is about engaging with the state and the systems, and the operative word here is engaging and not necessarily working. Engaging with the system because there are different perspectives which the state may have. And most importantly, working with vulnerable and marginalized populations. So this is an overall thrust within social work per se. Coming to criminology within social work, we are viewing crime as an outcome of structural inequalities in society based on caste, class, gender, ability, sexual orientation, etc. We also see crime as an outcome of social conflicts that are taking place in society. So that is an offshoot of or based on the whole concept of critical criminology. Looking at changing power dynamics, we very consciously try to engage with issues of criminalization of poverty, which means that looking at laws which specifically disempower people by custodializing them simply because they are poor people. And we are looking at processes of social exclusion. And all of this, to a great extent, particularly in the current context, is an outcome of neoliberalism, which is the paradigm within which the state seems to be operating more and more. So, as a result of the neoliberal policies, that means shrinking of the welfare state. The concept of the welfare state, which is enshrined in our constitution, you find that that is now not necessarily how things are playing out. So increasing privatization as a result of the forces of globalization, and even basic services, being handed over to private players, and the predominance of the market, which is deciding things, that becomes the important, driving force of the state policy. Then what impact does it create on marginalized and vulnerable sections, where they don't have access to justice, where the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing day by day, and as a result of this, you are faced in a situation where crime and exploitation of people is bound to increase. This is the overall context within which we would say social work is located.
So basically what we do in the center is, or what social work and criminology does, is it engages with the very concept of power. And in criminology, that whole sense of power becomes very important. Who defines what is right and what is wrong? Who decides how do you treat who have wronged? And who decides what should be the outcome of that particular situation? So our very engagement with the concept of crime begins with that. And that's where our ideological base begins, that who is marginalized and who is in power. And then engaging into that context, that where and when were the whole humanity or the whole populations taken on board when it came to deciding a particular legislation. So definitely ensuring that when you engage, as we just said, engagement means that how do you bring out or bring forth the fact that there is a sense of inequality in the very legal mechanism. And when that legal mechanism then becomes the overarching positioning that what is right and what is wrong, then that whole legal mechanism permeates your social world as well. Then in the social world, our right and wrongs get decided by a certain mandate which was probably not organically built from within the society and the customs that we have. So how do you challenge those set ideas, set customs for equality and justice? That is what social work with criminology aims towards.
the whole focus. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Third one
Yes,
is
sir.
a theorization.
Yes,
Theorization is a position
yes,
that the scholar takes or the teacher takes.
yes.
It can be common,
Yeah,
whether in sociology, whether in political science, whether in law.
absolutely.
And therefore, as I would present it as a PowerPoint,
Yeah.
I would put it first,
First, okay.
and then ideology second,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then intervention, practice
ठीक है.
should come after that.
Yes. Point taken.
Sir, our understanding was
Yeah.
that when the ideological base moves from positivism to radicalism, then definitely your interventions also get decided accordingly. And that is where our shift has come from corrections to justice. So that is how we had proceeded.
How
But
have you taken this theoretical position?
Yeah.
It is arbitrary, or is it?
Yeah.
it's based upon the, yeah,
Social work.
yeah.
I think it is not germane to social work. It is a position that you have chosen. Just
Actually,
like chosen.
yeah, that is right. That is right.
You need to positioning the politics
Yeah.
in understanding the social work.
Yes.
It may not be necessary with other social work.
True,
departments.
true. Yeah, because if you see how social work is across the country, the clinical model operates more in social work, where the intervention is within a very status quoist kind of
I've
construct.
seen that in the social work department in Lucknow University, which was the oldest social work department and one of the most conservative social work departments. With R.M. Verma only, a radical and he used to cry horse, and others were just trying to dampen his belief by talking of conservative social work. And Radha Kamal Mukherjee and all of them were conservative social work.
Yes, you may absolutely. So, what just taking off from what both Professor Pandey and Professor Rao are saying, one thing that is encouraged almost as a pedagogical issue as well as ideological issue within the School of Social Work is the spirit of questioning. And sometimes वो हम पे भी भारी पड़ता है, because then when the students learn how to question, they question you as well at first before anybody else. So that process of questioning, that process of challenging, really opens up their minds. In fact, you see the growth of a student from the first semester to the fourth. Then by the fourth semester, they are at loggerheads with each other. By the first semester, it's a real honeymoon period, because they're finding all the things and the concepts that we're talking about so wonderful compared to the undergraduate level from where they have come. So anyway, this process of questioning really helps in terms of the field interventions that they go into, because it's the orientation that matters the most. Just going further down into that, what actually we do in teaching the social work course with a focus on criminology and justice is that it canvasses the theoretical literature that is there in terms of perspectives of crime, right from the earliest schools to the postmodern criminology that we talk about. It also looks at the development of criminology as a discipline over the last century and more, in terms of what have been the shifts that have taken place and how those shifts could have an impact in terms of the intervention and the thought processes that we have. So if it, from the biological school right to the critical school and postmodern ideas, what have been the shifts in the development of criminology as a discipline? That is something that is consciously brought in when the theories are being taught in the classroom. There's also an attempt to look at what has been the contribution of each school of criminology. Not to run down any particular school just because it sounds outdated or old-fashioned now, but that at that given point in time, it had a great relevance. And if they were the founding fathers, if they didn't do the work that they did, I don't think we would be where we are today. So there is a real attempt to try and engage with students, because what typically happens is students begin to ask us, why are you teaching us these old-fashioned theories? They are not relevant anymore. And that's where the historicity of the process is something that we try to build within them. That Lombroso is also important because he gave something to the subject of criminology. And then there is an attempt to draw the linkages between these theoretical perspectives with what kind of approaches or methods one would apply within social work. Just to give you an example, that if your approach to criminology would be, let's say, in the psychosocial or the social learning theories paradigm, you would work with people in custody in a very different way. But if your approach to criminology would be of the radical or the critical criminology approach, then the kind of issues you would take up with them would be again very different. So it totally matters from which perspective you're coming from. And we also try to discuss with them that it is not either or. You know, it's not that it's only this approach that is important. Because in certain situations, the psychosocial approach is very important, because what about people who have already been processed by the system? They still need to be helped to get out of the system and re-enter the social mainstream. So they would require individual-centered work. They would require therapeutic interventions. But at the same time, you cannot be limited to that. You need to question the overall system and be able to see what can be done to bring about changes. Something.
So basically the micro and the macro perspective. So at the micro level, where you have the socio-psychological perspectives functioning, primarily catering to the needs and the services which the individual needs at both sides. It's the victim and as well as the offender, as well as the officials in the criminal justice system. Then you come up to the meso, where you try to understand the ethos within which that individual is functioning, that is the community level. And finally, if we have the time and the energy, then we engage with the macro, and that is the state. And that is how our field action projects have been ensuring that when you showcase all these three levels of work, it does become a ground for thought for many people involved, that yes, there is a possibility that this issue can be looked at differently and from different people's point of view. So it's not just a lawyer who's stating that, oh, this is right and this is wrong. It's not the social worker's view that, oh, it's been marginalized, it's everything put together. And this sense of rationality that comes in when you present your work helps in engaging, helps in justifying the ideological base with which you are engaging with the state, the individual and the community.
And this tension is there within social work itself today. Where there is, the methods like casework and group work, which are seen as old-fashioned traditional methods. And then you have methods like community organization, social action and advocacy, which are seen as the in things to do. So invariably you find students attracted more towards the latter ones than the former ones. And even within faculty there is this tension, in terms of there is even tension to the point of which whether we should be even teaching some of these methods. But we take a very different position where we feel that all of these methods have a place and therefore they need to be taught, and that there is no either or creating a hierarchy of methods. That's the position that in the Center for Criminology all of us feel. So to take it further, the way in which it is done is first introduce students to the concepts of crime and etiology, take them through to the development of different schools of criminology from the classical to the postmodern theories, helping them understand crime in a changing and developing socio-economic and political context. This is very important. And this is because India as a country is going through the kind of social change and upheavals that I don't think has happened in the earlier what has been happening in the last 15-20 years. And you put it back, that is from post-90s onwards, the kind of changes that have been taking place, the kind of upheavals that are going on, the kind of conflicts that are happening, whether you're looking at Maoism or terrorism and a whole range of cybercrime, a whole range of changes that are taking place in society in terms of crime. It's very important for students to be able to figure out why this is happening, what are the reasons behind it, and not just go by the dominant paradigm, but to be able to take a critical approach to the whole issue, and therefore discuss the implications for social work intervention, because marginalization is increasing today. Number of groups which are getting marginalized is increasing, and the groups which are already marginalized are getting more marginalized. So you have this skew in society in terms of social categories, and that is forcing social work to look at these issues. We cannot only now look at approaches where you are individual centered work. You need to engage with larger issues and communities. This is the please.
So basically, then in our classes we will be teaching why Niyamgari happened and why Nandigram happened. There is a context of criminology there, and why Nirbhaya happened and why Uthari happened, and what are the different perspectives that happen. So if you see this range when we teach in criminology, it encapsulates what all we do in our teaching.
This is what is, I have pulled it out from our course outline of the course which we have on criminology, trends and perspectives. That's the name of the course, one of the courses that are taught. And these are the objectives that are mentioned as per the academic council approved course. To develop conceptual clarity about crime in society, its etiology and the debates on the reasons for causation of crime. To develop critical awareness about the changing crime patterns in a globalized world and develop their ability to relate them to a localized environment. To understand the current debates on criminalization of marginalized groups towards intervention within the socio-legal framework and work towards change. This is the broad objectives of the course that we teach master students in social work specializing in criminology and justice. This is broadly the course contents very specifically, starting with definitions and patterns of crime, and then looking at all the theories from classical and neoclassical, biological, psychological and psychiatric theories, sociological theories starting from functionalism to symbolic interactionism. There is a conflict in the radical school, critical criminology and left realism, feminist criminology, late modernity and postmodern criminology, and then coming up with some new concepts today like risk society, etc. So this is what is trying to be covered in 30 hours. This is the course outline. It's a 2-credit course of 30 hours, which is called Criminology, Trends and Perspectives. I will ask you.
So essentially, if you see, the criminology course is the base course, and that is where we introduce the students to the wide range of perspectives that exist in criminology. Now, often one confusion that we often have is that once we teach criminology, victimology and penology gets left behind, corrections gets left behind. So how do you give that equal space to all these aspects to ensure that students move out with a balanced perspective? So when you're teaching about rape, when students say, but where is the offender and why are we talking about the offender and why aren't we talking only about the victim? And that is where we talk about corrections, penology and victimology all together at one level, and say that you have to be able to look at all three to be able to come to a coherent understanding as to what happened, why it happened, who bore the cost, and who was the actual victim. Was the victim of circumstances the victim of the offender in this case? If so, then what should be our approach? And if it was an offender who was an offender due to the power hierarchy that he or she exists to, then how much is the victim victimized, and is the victim a victim of social circumstances as well? So one has to be able to transcend this large domain to be able to understand that when you talk about crime, it's not about black and white, unfortunately, it's about shades of crime. So we do have a course on victimology, penology, corrections to restitution, and since our entire title has changed from a Department of Corrections to Criminology and Justice, traversing corrections to restitution is a huge challenge in the department. Because once you go out onto the field, the term corrections is only existing in probation and in the jails, and they're not operated at all. They're all received. So when you're teaching and when you say that restitution is what we are aiming towards, the first question that we face in the class is when correction itself does not exist, where is restitution? And then to be able to work that if corrections has not progressed, why is it that we can't think of restitution from the radical point of view? And that is one huge challenge that we're facing right now. Human rights is, it had become a fad word for a long, long time. and to be able to teach to our students that human rights is not the thing to achieve, because human rights, according to us, is just the basic rights that you are getting people to achieve. And if we are able to achieve constitutional rights in its true sense, then definitely it is an achievement. So to be able to teach criminology, victimology, penology, corrections and human rights and give equal importance to all is a challenge that we all are facing in the department, in the center, sorry. But we are hopefully being able to do that. And we also have a course on issues and challenges in criminology. And that is where the debates around media, around international pressures, around the economic policy are all discussed, and it's just kind of taken right there. So this is the canvas that we are talking about when we talk about social work in criminology.
Just to make it a little more clear in terms of how it plays out in the 2 years. In the first semester, they have a 2-credit course called Criminology Trends and Perspectives, which is this course that we are talking about. In the second semester, they have one course called Juvenile Justice and Child Rights. The rest of the first year, they are engaging entirely in social work subjects. So in the entire first year, they have all students, they only have 2 courses related to criminology. First semester, Criminology Trends and Perspectives. Second semester, Juvenile Justice and Child Rights. The third semester is when the specialization courses come in. So the range of courses that we have is in the third semester, we have victimology and crime prevention, correctional policies, correctional perspectives, policies and practice. That's the second course. Criminal law and practice, that's the third course. And the fourth course is issues and challenges in criminal justice social work. And a fifth course called rural crime and justice. Now the rural crime and justice is a course uniquely taught because it includes a 15-day visit to a rural area and living in a rural area attached to an organization which is working on issues relating to human rights of marginalized sections in rural areas. So they would go to an organization, like say the last batch of students went to 4 different organizations, 25 students divided into 4 groups, each group having about 6 students. One group went to an organization in Hubli Dharwad region called Vimochana, which works with children of Devdasi women. One group went to an organization called Bhasha Academy, which is in Ahmedabad, which works for the rights of denotified tribes. One group went to an organization in Beed district, which works on atrocities against Dalit women. And the fourth group went to an organization in Gujarat called Legal Aid and Human Rights Center, which works on tribal rights. So when they go for these kind of placements, where they are there for 15 days, and they try and understand the work that that organization is doing, as well as do some work there. The organization gives them an assignment. You do a small survey in this area and you give us a report. Or you do some case studies and you give us a report. So it helps that organization also in terms of how they do it. This kind of an attachment really broadens their horizon when they come back into the third semester. So these are the 5 courses they do in the third semester. And in the fourth semester, they do 2 specialization courses. One is called Contemporary Debates in Criminal Justice, and the other one is called Human Rights and Access to Justice. Now, the Contemporary Debates is a course which really helps to bring in everything that has not been covered in these 2 years. So it's like a platter where any issue which is hot and which needs to be debated and brought to class is taken on board in that course. So, for example, we had a very engaging lecture on death penalty, where Yug Chaudhary came in and really challenged the class in terms of, because even after 4 semesters, we do have students from all perspectives, including sometimes not very happy experiences, but doesn't matter, that's all part of the game. So these are the kind of courses, and if you compare this course outline with what used to be taught prior to 2006, you just look at the prospectus of the criminology specialization before 2006 and then look at it as it exists